Who knew you could reverse chronic illness simply by talking to your grandparents and decolonizing your plate? In this conversation with Nicolette Richer, we dive deep into what chronic illness is, how to reverse it, and the incredible impact decolonizing our plate has on reversing chronic illness. And it might not be what you think it is. And yet it's really, really simple. Nicolette Richer is an extraordinary human. She is founder of the Green Mustache Cafe. She's a regenerative medicine educator, and she's also a documentary filmmaker. She just launched her first short documentary, Grounded in My Roots, which is incredible. I highly suggest to go check it out. And she is also founder of 22 Million Strong, where she's biking and cycling right across Canada to help connect people more deeply with who they are, where their food comes, and to ultimately reverse chronic illness. She's a change maker and somebody who cares deeply about the health of humanity and the health of our planet. I'm Natalie Forsbauer, founder and editor-in-chief of Heart and Soul magazine. I'm really excited to bring this conversation to you. If you haven't checked out the magazine yet, head on over to heartandsoulmagazine.com. You can join our community for just $39.99 a year, and you get access to all the back issues of Heart and Soul magazine. It's incredible. Our contributors are beyond awesome, featuring farmers, gardeners, scientists, health educators from right across the world. You make yourself an amazing day and enjoy this conversation with Nicolette Richer. Before we dive into the work that you're doing right now, tell me what does chronic illness mean to you?
Mm, that's a really good question. Chronic illness is really just a symbol for the breakdown of all of our systems, because it's not just one system in the body that's broken, like the immune system or the weight or toxicity. It's so collective. It's nutritional deficiency, but that extends outside of the human body, and so it's like chronic disease, the disease and dis-ease with a hyphen in between there, um, really is happening throughout society. Like, it's the breakdown of the medical system where we've isolated the body into individual parts and not considered it to be a whole, where we've isolated the human body from its environment, from the soil, from the air, from the water. And and it's a chronic disease. It's also represents our thinking is diseased as well, right? So we've been talking about all of these things for decades. Like, I was studying this stuff, 25 years ago in first year university. And, things are, there's so much potential. And I feel like maybe we're reaching that tipping point within I don't know if it's in the next decade or the next, 100 years. I have no idea. That part, I'm not getting a sense of what that's going to look like, but it's just a disease of our society, like the, triple income families that we need now, and the, everything. So everybody's moving too fast and everybody's forgotten our roots. And so people aren't cooking nutritious meals, and, you know, food is like fashion, right? It's more like, how does the food
Mhm.
look and who made it is more important than the quality of the food, right? And so that's a disease, and which is a chronic disease as well. So it's in our thinking, it's in our spirit, it's in our physical body, it's in our emotional body, and it's something that collectively needs to be healed.
Hmm. That's powerful that food is fashion.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. How does that show up for the average person?
Yeah, where, now it's, if you ate in an amazing restaurant with an incredible chef that has a big name, and you waited years or months to get in to that restaurant, but the food is not food, right? It's looks gorgeous. It tastes amazing. But it's so rich in all of the ingredients that are causing the literal chronic diseases like the MS, the diabetes, the heart disease. And any one individual, like any one chef or one restaurant owner would say, well, we didn't cause that, because it's the accumulation of all the meals that that individual is eating every day, every month, every year. But at the same
Mhm.
time, every person is doing it. And
Yes.
so it's more about, um, cool to make like a certain kind of donut, or cool to
Mhm.
make, certain ingredients, like some of the craziest ingredients, people are like having fun making them um, vegan cauliflower wings. You're taking this beautiful food, cauliflower, and then you're deep frying it and you're rolling it in like these refined products like the salt, the oil, the sugar, and the flours, and then putting like Frank's hot sauce on them and then calling that food. And it's like, well, that's fashionable to have cauliflower wings, but now you've destroyed all the nutrients in the food. Like, what's the point? And so some people will say it's better to eat that than it is to eat chicken wings. And so, yeah, maybe, but not the way my grandmother would have eaten chicken wings in Africa that was boiled and maybe only done a few times a year, right? Like it was for
Yeah.
fuel, for nutrition, for mental health, for physical health versus it being for fashion. And so even all the trendy food products that we see on our shelves, like whether they're plant-based, they're vegan, they're keto, they're paleo. I mean, it's all about the branding, it's all about the marketing, it's all about the fashion of the product itself. And like, oh, you eat that and I eat that, as opposed to, yeah, I eat a carrot. Like there's nothing sexy about the carrot other than it's like a carrot. And sure, some days I boil it, some days I steam it, some days I bake it, some days I
Yeah.
eat it raw or I juice it or it turns into soup. Like, but I'm not out there, being like, look at me, I'm so hip because I ate a carrot.
Yeah, yeah. That is so true, Nicolette, and it reminds me of my little sister, Vanessa. So I think you already know I'm the oldest of 12. So my
Yeah.
youngest sister, when she was in elementary school, we always went to school with full carrots to lunch, and it was really kind of like the uncool thing to do, but she had a lot of excitedness about these carrots that she brought to school, and she came home one day with $2, and my mom was like, "Vanessa, where'd you get that $2 from?" She's like, "Oh, I sold a carrot at school." And she did that because the story became that these carrots were like candy carrots because they're so sweet. They were grown on my parents, on our family's dynamic and organic farm. So the kids at school in the elementary school were noticing the taste difference, and someone actually brought money to school to start buying carrots for us.
That is amazing. And I have tasted your family's carrots. Your dad, we walked out into the fields. He showed me
Yeah.
all the foods. We picked the carrots and they were we grabbed them out of the soil. We wiped them on our jeans. We ate them. They were so delicious. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so I believe that I would have paid, yeah, $1,000 for those carrots.
That's cool. I'm so glad you got to go to the farm. Um, Nicolette,
Mm,
what does it take to reverse chronic illness? And before talking about that, like, what does
mm.
that mean to reverse chronic illness?
Yeah. So yeah, talking about chronic disease and chronic illness in the context of, the human physical body, diabetes and cancer, infertility, MS, all the other autoimmune disorders, heart disease, mental health like panic attacks, anxiety, ADHD, Crohn's disease. I mean, the list is long. To reverse these conditions. So, what it means is you would be diagnosed with one of these conditions, which usually starts off with poor gut health and chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation, which then suppresses the immune system, and then the body breaks down, is not able to detoxify, is not able to absorb nutrients, and then you manifest these diseases, which are then diagnosed by your doctor. So, if you want to reverse these diseases, you actually have to go backwards and undo all the conditions that created the disease in the first place. Now, on a physical standpoint, and then I'll get into the emotional standpoint. So, on the physical standpoint, it means we have to hypernutrify our body. We need to give it all of the nutrients, not just the macronutrients. Like our governments and our nutritionists and our dietitians have been talking about macronutrients for far too long now. Like, get over it. There is more than just protein and carbohydrates and fats that the body needs. Our bodies need like 100 that we know of, 125 plus other nutrients, right? So that's the manganese and the iodine and the chlorine. Like people think of it, chlorine's bad for you, but our body does need molecules of chlorine. We need potassium in high amounts, sodium in low amounts. So we have to rebalance the body by giving it an abundance of the nutrients it does need. And then also making sure that the body doesn't get too much of the nutrients that it doesn't need. So like the calcium and the sodium, if you get that in high amounts, the body starts to break down. So the first things first, repair the nutrient deficiencies. And then when you do that, the body's able to start detoxifying again. It's able to absorb the nutrients. And then what happens is the inflammation goes away, the cytokine markers go away, basically the body goes back into balance. And then the disease is just gone. So your body wasn't able to absorb insulin that the pancreas was making. And so you reverse all the conditions that created that. The arteries clear, insulin gets across the cell walls. And then all of a sudden, the person doesn't have diabetes anymore. The A1C levels drop. The cholesterol levels come back to normal. The thyroid levels come back to normal. Like everything just restores itself. You no longer have fatty liver disease and fatty organ disease. Like all of that just literally melts away. The body's amazing. So reversing the chronic disease means that you do this and eventually within a very short period of time, for some people it's a few weeks to a few months, then you're able to get off the medications. You're able to, the doctor will say, oh, you actually don't need that surgery anymore. And then the body is just, it's self-healed, in balance, free of chronic pain, free of medications. But then beyond that, there's also the additional element of stress, and stress on the body, and a negative form of stress that is often managed by our emotions, by our brain, like how we are perceiving our environment, how we interpret our interactions with our environment, other people, our relationships. And so this also has a very negative impact on chronic disease, in the manifestation of chronic disease in the body. And so there's this underlying part too, especially, we'll probably talk about this a little bit, for individuals, especially people who've had a lot of trauma in their life. So Indigenous peoples, people of color, any person who's experienced any amount of trauma in their life, regardless of their color, their race, their religion, that also has underlying, that puts literally stress on the intestine, stress on the liver, then, which also contributes to the body not being able to absorb nutrients, eliminate waste, and then disease is present. So often when we heal that as well, then the body is fully healed.
What's the hardest part of this conversation for you? The conversation about reversing chronic disease and
yeah, these are really good questions. Oof. The hardest part for me is that we've known this for centuries. We have known this for centuries. It's in the medical literature, it's in the textbooks that go back thousands of years. It's literally has been written on the walls. And it's in every single biology book. It's in every single biochemistry textbook for every first-year university student. It's in every single psychology. Like I did 4 years of psychology. I did my pre-med sciences, and I going through these, and I'm like, it is written there. But if you're not reading these textbooks through the lens of being free of chronic disease and chronic pain, you might skip over that because you just want to pass the exam, right? So it's there. The science is there. We don't need any more science to prove this out. Our body needs nutrients. It needs to detoxify. We need to be free of stress, emotional, mental, physical, spiritual. So the hardest part is that humans, especially in, first world countries, Western countries, we've just completely removed ourselves from that knowledge. And it's really hard seeing the huge amounts of suffering that are around us every single day. And then the stories people tell themselves. So they tell themselves, oh, this is genetic. I have no control over this. Or my doctor says I'm going to have to live with this for the rest of my life. Or that, you created it. And, what I mean by that is that there's people blaming other people. It's because you don't exercise enough, because you don't eat well, because of this, because of that. But you're saying this to somebody who doesn't have a relationship to their body, where they're so disconnected for themselves, but they also don't have the relationship because our society has created that. We have not taught these very basic principles to our elementary school students. Like your sister's going, you and all of your siblings are going to school with like organic carrots in their lunch boxes. And depending on what era that was, you were either made fun of or you were getting $2 for the carrots, right? But, for the majority of kids, they're not eating well, they're eating refined processed foods all the time. And humans are so duped by the marketing that's out there that it's really hard because it's almost like, nobody stands a chance anymore because of these huge, massive food lobby groups, government policies that are in place, like, the diabetes and the heart disease and the cancer associations that are promoting the consumption of like these horrific products that are creating the disease. So we're just entrapped in this system of knowledge that's not correct. And so it's really hard having these conversations when the answer is so simple, but we've just made it so complicated that it literally takes so much undoing and unlearning. And some people are just not, they're so indoctrinated by everything that, that it's just so hard for them to even hear that they actually have agency over their health.
Mm. What do you think is the easiest step for someone to take if they are identifying as having a chronic disease or illness? What are what questions, if I'm identifying as having chronic disease or illness, what questions do I need to be asking myself, and to better understand what actions I need to take, how would I begin to identify what those are?
Yeah. So, 10 years ago when I first started doing this, I was very practical. I'm like, okay, the easy answer is you go to the grocery store and you just buy food that doesn't have a label on it. One ingredient items that don't have labels. So there's no nutrition facts on it. It basically just says rice, quinoa, potatoes, bananas, oranges. You just buy those foods and you take them home and you cook them. And you cook them in whatever way you want to cook them. You can steam them, bake them, boil them, water fry them. But, there's no like refined oil, refined salt, refined sugar, because refined flours, and no refined products. So that would have been my practical answer 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. Because I like to just get the results. I'm like, let's just get it done. You have a disease. Let's just reverse it. Like, do what I say. And then your doctor's going to tell you don't need your meds anymore. So why would we waste our time doing anything else? But it's obviously harder for others, right?
Yeah.
To accept that when they're having to unlearn and learn. So now though, if you are someone who identifies with a chronic disease, the first thing that needs to happen is you need to shift your mindset to being one of complete hope. You have to let go of what everybody else has ever told you. And you absolutely need to believe that your body is capable of being free and liberated of that chronic disease. You have to just believe that, because if you don't believe that, then you're just going to be a victim to your disease and you'll never take the action, like go to the store and buy the $2 carrots and, and cook them and eat them. Like, you will just not believe that food is the answer or anything is the answer. So number one, you have to believe that you could be free of that chronic disease. And the reason I say that now is because nutrition is very important. Detoxification is very important. Alleviating the stress, your mental health has to be liberated from your perception of negative stress and how you interpret the world. That also is really important. But then there's other factors as well. So somebody could be doing all the right things and still get sick. And I am of the 100% belief that there is always a solution. So like this morning, for example, I just read this incredible podcast transcript of this doctor who had stage 4 cancer and stage 4 non-Hodgkin's, large cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And he was doing everything right. Everything that I teach, he was doing it, but he still had cancer. And for him, it turned out that he had root canals. And this is something in the world of dentistry that is still, like, I was taught this 15 years ago. Root canals are the demise of your health. And because your body is consistently 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to fight infection in this root canal because it's a dead tooth, and that dead tooth is really not supposed to be there. So for him, he had that removed, and literally, like within 6 weeks, I think, his football-sized tumor that was in his belly was gone. So now I could read that. And if I'm thinking, well, that's not possible, right? Like you can't reverse stage 4 cancer, you can't reverse diabetes. So I won't even pay attention to that article. And I won't even get curious. And I won't even question root canals, right? So the first things first is you have to believe that your disease is reversible. And when you do that, everything else changes after that, because instead of finding the cure for the disease or the treatment for the disease, which may or may not be there and may or may not be effective if there is a treatment option, then at least you're going to start researching things like, how do I reverse this disease, or what are the causes, potential causes of these disease? And you might come up with like 25 different potential causes of this condition, right? Of the illness. And we have to stop also. The second part of that is we have to stop thinking about the disease as the disease, like the name, diabetes, stage 4 cancer, heart disease. Because when we do that, then we just try and treat that individual condition. So it's kind of like having a headache and you take Advil, Tylenol, right? But what if your headache is caused by dehydration or lack of sleep or stress or, deficiency in magnesium or iodine? So when you actually say, well, I want to treat the body and liberate the body from being, and have it be free of chronic pain and free of illness, then we think much broader and bigger, like, well, okay, that means I need to think about the inflammation. I need to think about what I'm missing. I need to think about what's too much in my body, right? So then with those two pieces, thinking about your disease is reversible, and know that you're going to not stop until you find the solution. And then B, stop thinking of it as the disease. Think of it as a whole, complete, beautiful system. It's a body that's just in dis-ease. So think about all the different things that you can do to put it back into balance.
Oh man, I love that. So powerful. Hope and changing the lens. And that's also a really powerful part of the conversation that I like to engage in, is it's not the dis-ease or the illness is not saying something's wrong with you. It's your body giving you feedback.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. I always say, don't shoot the messenger. Like your body is the messenger, and
That's right.
you sitting in the seat of your soul, observing the body, you have the ability to communicate with that messenger, your body. You can say, what's going on here? Like I have a pain right now that I can't tell if it's my pancreas, my spleen, my stomach, my small intestine. It's been there for a while. I definitely need to go get it checked out. But it's probably related to stress, but I also don't know. So the thing is, though, is that I can communicate, and I can just lay there with my hand on that area and say, okay, what's going on? What's happening? Talk to me, like tell me something. And what's awesome is that if you are still and quiet for long enough, you'll hear an answer. And sometimes it might be money. Sometimes it might be anger. Sometimes it might be pancreas. It'll be like a little twinge of a word that'll come out. And if you can just capture that, then this is also putting yourself in that place of autonomy and power over yourself. So don't shoot the messenger. Like I could easily just go and take I'm not ready for a painkiller, but a lot of people might do that, or they might take like an antacid, or they might take, something to try and get rid of that pain. And I'm not getting rid of the pain because I want to explore it. I want to listen to it. I want to talk to it. It's a messenger. So it's important that we don't shoot the messenger. Don't cut it out. Don't drug it out. Don't, unless you find that is the next important step. Like, I'm not against chemosurgery and radiation. I'm not against taking medications when you don't have another option. Like I'm all in favor of that, but only as the last resort. So listen to the messenger.
Yeah, it's really powerful. Makes a lot of sense. one of the things you and I've touched on before is, well, before I ask you that, I want to ask you, why should the average person care?
Yeah, wow, that's yeah, so again, 10 years ago I might have answered because, you should care about this because why would you want to be suffering and want to be in pain?
Mhm.
Why wouldn't you want to be liberated from your chronic disease? But it goes much deeper than that. It's more about who would you be if you were liberated from this disease? And with you operating in your highest power, from your highest being, right? Where you have full energy, your mind is clear, you wake up every morning and you want to like just embrace the world, not just face it, right? It's not about surviving, it is about thriving in this world. So, who would you be if you were liberated from that disease? Well, yeah, you would have tons of energy, your mind would think clearly, you probably have great ideas, you'd probably want to go out there and work. But what kind of work would you want to do? And what I find is when people are healed from their illness, especially through using food as medicine, because this is where they actually see that they're related to everything around them. They're related to the soil is their cousin, right? The air is their brother. The water is their sister. The everything is connected. And then all of a sudden, they want to be in service of that bigger entity, the world or other people. And so for me, why people need to care is because we are living in a world of extreme disharmony. We always have been. For as long as humans have been on the planet, there has been disharmony. Uh, there's been war, there's been rape, there has been like assaults of all kind, human to human, human to animal, to the planet, to the environment. And so we need to care about this because once we actually start caring about having a healthy body, then it actually innately forces us to care about having a healthy family, a healthy community, a healthy planet, a healthy spiritual mindset. And what I see come from that is just this um, abundance of love that is present all around us. And when people are in pain and they're worried about themselves, worried about their disease, worried about dying early, leaving their family, loving becomes extremely hard. First, loving the self is really difficult, right? Because you're just in constant fight and flight and fear all the time. And then loving other people becomes really hard. People are more angry, they're snappy, they're blaming. And so it's really important that we care about reversing these chronic diseases and understanding our connection with our greater environment so we can really just see healing take place on all levels.
It's really powerful. Tell me more about tell me more about that. And because you linked us, well, you linked me to my connection with food and soil and water and air and earth and all the things, and how we're actually more connected than we're disconnected. Um, and at the same time, it's the disconnection that creates that dis-ease. And so
Mm.
one of the things I've heard you talk about is decolonizing our play. And I'm wondering how that's connected to deepening us into this journey of reversing chronic illness and of uh, being more connected to who we are and where we came from and what's important to us.
Yeah, that is probably one of the most important topics I think that we all need to be having. And not just because reconciliation is, on the top of our political agendas, for most politicians. Not just because, hundreds, if not thousands, of kids were found in grave sites, not just across Canada, but across the globe. Decolonizing our plate is a really important, decolonizing our life is a really important topic for me because number one, most people, I would say, if I were to go out down the street and ask 100 people and say, do you know what colonization is? They would not know what it is. And in fact, somebody close to me, very, very intelligent, she even asked me like, why are you calling it decolonizing your plate? Like nobody's going to know what that means. And she didn't know what it meant. It didn't know what it meant. And I think that's very telling of our time, that we have all of this work going on. We're hosting all of these events. We have Orange Shirt Day, but I think a good majority of Canadians don't even know what colonization is. And so I'll start with that. So when European settlers came in, and not just into Canada, but North America, United States, Australia, New Zealand, like, Africa, I mean, so many countries all around the world, South America, there was a lot of raping and pillaging that happened. There was a lot of trying to assimilate Indigenous peoples, all around the world. And when I say assimilate, it's to say, okay, you can't speak your language, you can't eat your food, you can't engage in your cultural practices, and you need to become like the white man, basically. So this was, the essence of patriarchy at its highest, and where where so many people were displaced. They were displaced from their lands, where they knew how to hunt and gather and feed their peoples and really keep themselves disease free for not just thousands of years, but millions of years. Like diabetes in Canada in Indigenous communities was virtually nil, zero, 1940 and before that. Right. So and it's not because we didn't know what diabetes was. We've known what diabetes, it's the sugar disease, right? It's the sweet disease, the sweet urine disease. We've known that for hundreds and hundreds of years. So colonization, coming in and displacing people who had lived there for millions of years from their lands, and then basically feeding them white sugar, white flour, salt, and all refined products, to the point where now there's so many remote and rural communities that are populated by BIPOC individuals. So that's Black, Indigenous people of color, and they can't access real food, fresh food. I just had a friend of mine, her friend came back from Northern Canada, from an Indigenous community up there, and they're selling cherries, 2 pounds of cherries for $90, $90. In some of these communities, if they want to eat a banana, it's $10 per banana, not per bunch, per banana. So they can't get fresh, real food in their communities because, they were not farmers before colonization. They were hunter gatherers. They were able to move across the lands, but now they've been put on reserves and, and then basically force fed this refined processed food, which has created these diseases. But another side of that story, it's not even the refined processed foods that have created the diseases. It's the trauma of colonization, of having your children taken from you, of not being able to speak your language and practice your culture, and you engage in your own cultural practices. And this trauma is intergenerational trauma. And we know it's intergenerational trauma because there's been so many studies done, like the cherry blossom study or the monkey study, where, you traumatize a monkey or you traumatize a mouse, by spraying it with cherry blossom spray, and then you shock it at the same time. And then you keep doing this until the mouse is afraid of the cherry blossom smell. It won't go near cherry blossoms anymore. But then that mouse has babies, and then that mouse has babies, and that house has babies. And without ever spraying or shocking the children, all they do is present it with the cherry blossom, and the mouse is terrified of the cherry blossom. So it really shows that that trauma that happens gets carried down in our DNA. It is intergenerational. And when we have trauma, we know that we drink more, we smoke more, we're depressed more, we're angry more, and we're not going to make wise food choices. So of course, we're going to eat those unhealthy, really addictive foods. And so then of course, we're going to have disease. So having this conversation about decolonizing our plate, it's not just about eating, an abundance of plant-based whole foods. It's not about letting go of our industrialized farming practices that harm so many animals, right, and harm the planet. It's about learning about the intergenerational trauma and healing that as well. It's about true reconciliation, where we truly embody an essence of, not just an essence of being, of empathy for our history and what we collectively, so this is humans collectively, not just the white man, even though, yes, it was the European white settlers that did a lot of this, but we have to collectively own this. We have to collectively feel this, and we have to collectively heal this. And it's not going to happen if we have this mentality of the past is the past and I didn't have anything to do with that. I hear that often from people. Well, I didn't do it, so why do I have to say I'm sorry? But we all collectively need to just own the fact that we're all human. We've all made horrific mistakes in our lives. We all need to embrace that history and embrace it in a way that it's going to be hard to do it. It's hard to read these books and to hear about what was done to Indigenous peoples around the world, but also to know that what was done to Indigenous peoples now is being done to everybody. We are all being force-fed this settler food, this refined processed food. It's not just Indigenous peoples anymore. It's everybody. So decolonizing our plate is understanding our history and then collectively saying, I'm sorry, and then moving forward and saying, you know what, there's a solution that we all need to be working towards.
That's powerful. Nicolette, that what you're talking about is just so powerful on so many levels, from helping people pull apart and define colonization to identifying the trauma, and not just that's happened over the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, but intergenerational. And how do we pull that apart, and how do we sit with ourselves and each other in the messiness of all the learning that we need to unlearn around food, around relationships, around what it is to really love one another, right? Because ultimately, I think for me, that's what it comes back to, is how do we hold each other's hands and really just see and hear the story, the experience.
Yeah. And, as you're saying that, I just, was picturing, just because I've heard it so many times, this part about, why do I have to apologize? I didn't do it. And, anybody who's listening to this right now, I know in their being, there's something being shaken up, and it could be anger, and it's like, why are you blaming me because I'm white, or there's just a lot happening, or some people are feeling so sad, and so then they're closing in because it's too much, right? Like if you read like beautiful book called Legacy that just came out, I can't remember the author's name. She's a beautiful Indigenous woman who wrote this book, really talking about the relationship between colonization and chronic disease. Like perfect timing that this just came out for me with like wrapping up my PhD. I love it. And, and it's hard even for me that knows exactly what she's writing about. It's even hard for me to read her book. It brings up, so I feel so sad. And like, there's nothing that I could ever do in the world that would even make a difference like that. Some like almost a feeling, but that's not true. So that's not true. Okay. So imagine yourself, you have 11 siblings. I have 4 siblings. If one of them was raped, if one of them was beaten, if one of them was captured and tortured, if one of them was robbed and had their whole house, like just everything taken from them, and they were left with nothing, not their children, not their belongings, their possessions, what would I do? I wouldn't say, well, I didn't do it. I would hold them and I would say, I am so sorry this happened to you. And then I would let them talk. I wouldn't say like, don't talk about that because it's too hard for me to hear. I would let them tell their story. And we know that if you keep stories inside of you, that it just eats away at you, and it eats away. When we suppress those experiences, it eats away at you. So what do therapists do? That's why people go to therapy. It's to talk, it's to get it out of their body. So I would let that person talk, and I would not try and fix them. I would allow them to be broken. I would allow them to share their story. I wouldn't say, well, get over it. I wouldn't say, put that behind you. I wouldn't say, deal with it on your own. I would just say, what do you need from me? How can I help? How can I support? Do you want me to make a meal? Can I take care of your children? Can I give you time to heal? Can I take you to a therapist. You know, we would ask them questions. And this is exactly what needs to be happening right now, really, for all people. Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. For anybody who is Indigenous, who is Black, who is a person of color, for sure. Right? It's not even just talking about Indigenous people, it's talking about the Japanese that were brought to Canada and forced to work on the railroads, and they died and they were put in internment camps and removed from their families. Like, you know, this has been happening, whether you're Jewish and Polish, or you're in, you know, Croatia, or, you know, everything that's happening right now, you know, with the war, you know, with Russia. Like, it's happening to everybody right now. So it's not also just what happened 500 years ago. It's today and it's every day. There's always going to be trauma. So
Mhm.
what do we do when someone has trauma? How do we support them? How do we help them? And loving them, saying I'm sorry. That's the first two things that you can do.
Mm. So it sounds like decolonizing our plates is more than just changing the food that's on our plate.
Yeah, but I think starting with food is a really easy place to start, because
Okay.
who doesn't love eating potatoes? Like, everybody loves potatoes. Like, when I tell people potatoes are part of our program that helps you reverse food, they all go, "Oh my God, thank goodness. I was told to not eat potatoes." And for Indigenous peoples, you know, they would move across the lands across Canada, because potatoes grow, these beautiful little tiny nugget potatoes, they grow underneath the earth everywhere across Canada. Like, they're just there growing, ready for us to eat. And we don't, and most people don't know that. They're free to us, and they're so nutrient dense. It's a perfect food. They're so healthy for you. Okay. So gather around food first, right? Make a meal for somebody, make a meal with somebody, right? When somebody has a baby, what do? You go to the hospital and you bring them food, because we all know hospital food is shit, right? So, you know, what do we do around the holidays? What do we do around potlucks, you know, and potlatches? We bring food. It's always about food. Food is what unites us, and it allows us to gather and be together. Studies have shown when people eat together, there is healing. Families are more connected, right? So let's start with food. And like I said, around reversing chronic disease, if the food is made in a healthy way, right? Not deep fried and refined oil and smothered in tons of sodium and tons of refined sugar, you know, but we keep those nutrients vibrant in the food. Lots of salads, lots of beautiful whole grain meals, lots of beautiful lentils and legumes. When we eat this food, oh my gosh, it nourishes our soul, but it nourishes our body. It
Mhm.
then also then kickstarts that relationship building with each other, but then also with ourselves and our environment and our
Mm.
soil and our air and our water. Because nobody wants food that's grown in toxic water, toxic soil, toxic air. Nobody wants that. So we start using less pesticides, less herbicides. We understand that actually organic foods have deeper roots. They survive the drought. So why would we like be growing genetically modified Monsanto food? We know that that food does not survive and thrive, right? And
Mm.
so then all of a sudden the conversation shifts, and then people want to have gardens, and then they're working outside in their gardens together. And ooh, look at that. You're being physical and moving your body, and you don't have to go to a gym, right? Like,
Right.
it just all connects. And so then all of a sudden people start buying up farmland, and they don't want the big, massive monocrop farms. They want individual, tiny family farms. You know, then all of a sudden people are shopping at farmers markets, because I don't want to grow food. I want to give the farmers my money so they grow the food, because they love doing that and picking it at 5 in the morning. So then we have an appreciation for each other and the gifts and talents that we all have. So
Mm.
yeah, starts with decolonizing your plate, starts with food. And then, of course, you know, you eat this way and you will be liberated from your pain of your chronic disease. That will melt away, and you're not spending all that money on medications and undergoing risky surgeries.
Mm. So what I'm hearing is start with food,
Mhm.
eat locally, support our farmers, and connect more deeply with um, ourselves and others through gathering around food. Is that right?
100%. Yeah. And have a conversation with somebody who is, um, I would say, I don't know, 70 and older. So
Mhm.
a grandparent. And I love this because our documentary came out. It's a short doc, and it's called Grounded in My Roots, our second documentary that'll be out in 2024 is Food of Our Ancestors. But it's all about getting deeply rooted in who you are. Where do you come from? What did your ancestors eat? And what's been phenomenal about this documentary when we sent it out asking for testimonials is people watched it and they bawled their eyes out because they started to remember their grandparents, and they remembered their grandparents' gardens and being in the garden with their grandparents, right? Just like when I was at your house, I remember pulling into, or your family farm. So I remember pulling into the driveway of your family farms, out in Chilliwack, and I didn't know if I had the right house. And, you had given me the address. And then I see this like 11 or 12-year-old boy. It was your nephew, right? Your sister's son or your brother's son. I think it's your brother's son, in the garden, and he's weeding and harvesting food. And I'm like, what is there an 11-year-old kid in the garden for? Like, and not an 11-year-old South Asian kid that's been brought over to, work in the greenhouses in Abbotsford that you see everywhere, but like an 11-year-old Caucasian kid in the garden. And I went up to him and I was like, is this of course our farm? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, who are you? And he's like, oh, that's my grandfather. But I'm like looking at this, and it was like, I was just in awe. And he was, the way he was talking about what he was doing and the weeding, and like, you could tell he loved being in the garden. It was not a chore for him. Right. And, and then just seeing the relationship, and, I met his dad, your brother, I believe it's your brother, and then met your dad. And, it was incredible. So connecting with your grandparents and figuring out what they ate. And if you don't know your grandparents, that's okay. Just ask your neighbor what their grandparents ate, because it'll be the same kind of food. They had gardens that were grown in organic soil, and they really, like, for the majority, like, pesticides and fertilizers were just being introduced. So a lot of people were skeptical, and they were like, I'm not going to put that on my lawn. And they would just pick the food and they would make a stew and a soup. And like, the food was hearty. It was delicious. It smelled good because the nutrients were still in there. They weren't using refined processed ingredients for the most part. So start with food and get to know your ancestors.
I love that. Start with food, get to know your ancestors. A farming family that I did, and it deepened me into what a profound gift that has been in my life, and it deepened my connection to connecting people more purposefully and intentionally with our elders. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's yeah, and I had no idea when I set out on this journey, to do this work, that we'd ever even make a documentary like that, because I wasn't even that deeply connected to my own roots. And through going back to Africa in 2018 and seeing my grandmother, and then just watching her at like 92 years old, like work the farm, and all my relatives on the farmland, and seeing just how for them it's, subsistence living. So if the rains don't come, the food doesn't grow. If the rows aren't harvested and seeded, then there's no food. And so seeing that deep connection, but then seeing when they harvested the food and prepared it, it was so simple, like, but so delicious. And then in that, I really realized that that's actually where decolonizing my plate came from, was from that trip in Africa. Because I realized that you don't have to be Black, you don't have to be First Nations, you don't have to be Aboriginal, South Asian. You could be any human on the planet, and we all have this united history of having to find food, grow food that was real food, and prepared just really simply. And with 350,000 different plant species on the planet that we can eat, it didn't matter where you were, you just ate what was available, whether it was durian in the Philippines or whether you eat apples in BC or peaches, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You don't have to have access to 350,000 species. Really, if you have access to maybe 30 to 50 different species, you can live chronic disease free for your whole entire life, as long as you don't destroy those foods. So making that film, really, that brought me home. like literally brought me home. So home being here, like within me, in my
Yeah.
heart, in my ancestry, in my own roots. And I just, yeah, seeing how powerful that's been in helping other people connect to their home as well.
Yeah, yeah, I could really feel that and see that for you. And what is the most rewarding part and most meaningful part of that for you?
I think, and not even that I think, I know. So coming home, obviously, depending on who you talk to, has many different meanings. So on a spiritual, through a spiritual lens, it's coming home means coming back to yourself. It's the answers are always within you. The love that you seek is always within you. You don't need to seek it any other place but within you. It's the foundation, right? So if you are unstable and you're looking for foundation outside of yourself, you will never find it because that foundation is within you. That's where home is. It starts always here inside. So on a spiritual lens, that's coming home, which is so important because again, you could eat right, you could sleep right, be free of toxins, and you can still manifest disease in your body if spiritually you are stressed. So you got to come home spiritually, my friends. Then coming home physically, right, is coming home to your house, to your family, to your roommates, to your hostel if you're traveling. It doesn't matter where it is. There's always a home somewhere, right? A physical place where you're going to lay your head at night. And for many homeless people, like they come home to a park bench and that is their home. They prefer that over a shelter. So there's that physical coming home. Then there's the ancestral coming home, your history coming home. So knowing where you come from. And for a lot of people who are very, I'm a US citizen and they're very, patriarchy is like, I'm a US, what does that mean though to be a US citizen? What does it mean to be indigenous? What does it mean to be African, European, of any descent European? What does that mean? Right? What does that mean? And we label that, and these labels that we've given ourselves, it's just defined by the borders that you were born within or that you moved to. But what does that really mean? And so it's to ask those questions. And so historically coming home, we can have a discussion about what that means. But ultimately, I think for me, what's so important about this is that it's coming to when we really keep asking, where is home? Where is home? Where is home? For all of us, we're all going to come back to the same answer is that we are these beautiful spiritual, physical beings that are in relationship with our environment. We are nature. We are just nature. That's all we are, So it doesn't matter what culture, it doesn't matter what race, it doesn't matter what religion. At the end of the day, we are made up of these cells that are energetic, like they literally are guided by plus and minus signs, like this is just basic physics and biology and biochemistry. Like it actually is like, it's pretty simple, complicated, yes, but simple. But the same principles that govern grass and trees and soil, right? The air, the food that we eat, like we're all just nature. And so once we realize that, then I think from that foundation, we start to ask things differently and do things differently and behave in a different way. And it doesn't mean, and I want to really be clear on this, that with everything that happened with George Floyd, with our understanding of everything that has happened with the history of colonization, um, you know, I'm not one who says, well, I don't see race and I don't see religion. Oh, I see it so clearly. Like, I had there was so much racism against me growing up, having interracial parents that, lost many of their friends when they got married, et cetera, et cetera. So I see race.
Mhm.
And that means I see you and I see your history and I see the abuse and oppression that's happened to you. And and that means also if I see a white person, I don't categorize them as a white person. It means that I have to ask, like, what kind of white person are you? Are you European? Are you Polish? Are you, Jewish? Like, what does that mean? And it just means that I get to ask more questions. I get to connect to you. I get to connect to your history. I get to then empathize with whatever it is that you've been through, and then we get to form relationship, right? So at the end of the day, it just comes back to coming home. We have this united front that we're all nature. And when we're all nature, everybody is our relative. The rocks, the soil, the air, the water, the birds, the feathered friends, the fin friends, the furry friends. And then from that place, I think that life can just be very, very different because we start to care for our relations.
Very powerful, Nicolette.
Hmm.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to, yeah, just chat about this because
Mm.
there's just so many, it's like weaving threads, and creating a tapestry. There's just so many pieces, right? All within this. And it's hard to, I'm someone who I can't talk about, like a lot of people just want the one story, like how do you reverse disease? But it's much more complicated than that. And you, just by asking the beautiful questions that you asked, allowed, gave me the space to bring all of those threads in. So thank
Oh,
you.
man.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank
that makes
you.
my heart very happy for so many different reasons. And in that, I want to presence and honor the journey that you are on and the journey that has brought you to these moments in time, because I can feel the richness in exactly where you're at and all of life preparing you for these moments to be a voice for
Mm,
us to connect more deeply with our home here on earth, with nature, with each other, and sitting in the stories and um, just holding each other's hearts and knowing how powerful and learning how powerful it is to start with food, because we all need to eat. We
totally.
all need food, and connecting with where our food comes from, how it's grown, and our history of food with our ancestors, and going back not just one or two generations, but many, many generations, can only shift us in powerful ways. So thank you for that, Nicolette.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Start with food, my friends. We all have that one commonality that we all eat. We have to
Yeah.
eat. If you don't eat, you will eventually die. So food
Yes.
is
Yes.
necessary. So
Yes.
let's start there. And it's a fun place to start, right? Like, you know,
Yeah. It's the
yeah.
best. Okay. It's one of the best places to start because most people like to eat. Not all, but
Oh,
most
yeah.
people probably like to eat.
Oh, yeah.
um, and Nicolette, when people want to find you, where's the best place to find you? Where's the best place to connect with you and to watch your short documentaries and follow you so they can see
Mm.
your newest documentary coming out next year?
Yeah, so they can go to Grounded in My Roots, and there they'll be able to watch the trailer for Grounded in My Roots, and then get on the wait list for when the film comes out. It just received official selection at the Maui Film Festival, and it's now sitting with some other film festivals right now. So we'll be able to release that hopefully at the end of the year. But we do private screenings. So if anybody wants to do a private screening in their community, please head over to groundedinmyroots.com and get on the list. And then we can make that happen for you. You can also find me at nicolettericher.com, or our plant-based restaurants. Come in and see us at greenmustache.com. Lots of places. And of course, if anybody is out there that currently has a chronic disease diagnosed by your medical team, and you want to shift your mindset and believe that it is reversible, then I'm more than excited to work with you to show you exactly how you could do that using food as medicine. So reach
Mm,
out to me. All my information is on those websites.
right. And people can also follow your journey with 22 million strong, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I'll be running and biking across Canada next year. So that's 7,200 kilometers that I will be covering by foot and bike wheels. And please follow us at richerhealth.ca or 22millionstrong.ca. and you can follow our journey. And I would love for you to come out and bike and walk and run with me, rollerblade, whatever your mobility movement of choice, an A-Link or bike perhaps. So yeah, come out and join me on the whole tour, or, tiny sections of the tour. I would love that. And if you are someone who is Indigenous or BIPOC, please reach out to us as well, because we'll be hosting gatherings in different BIPOC communities across Canada to have conversations like this, to really uncover what are the barriers to accessing clean, real food. And that's some important research that I'm going to be doing, so that we can bring that research to our policymakers, so that collectively we can find solutions to the food security challenges that we're facing across Canada.
Mm, so be it, and so it is. Thank you.
And
Thank
so
you,
it
Nicolette.
is. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Grateful you joined us for that conversation and interview. If you haven't subscribed to Heart and Soil Magazine yet, head over to heartandsoilmagazine.com, click on that subscribe button, and join us for just $39.99 a year. You make yourself an amazing day, and I'm really grateful you're part of our community.